Have you ever looked at a lake and wondered what's really beneath the surface? How deep it truly goes? What might be lurking in those black depths? I used to think such questions were just the stuff of campfire stories, until what happened at Lake Tahoe. Welcome to the OBSCURALORE Vault. I'm your host, and today I'll be sharing a story that still gives me nightmares. What I found beneath Lake Tahoe defies explanation, defies reality itself. If you're listening to this in the dark, you might want to turn on a light. What lurks beneath those waters, it's aware now, and I believe it's spreading. Part 1. The Legend. Growing up in Northern California, Lake Tahoe was always this beautiful tourist destination. Crystal clear waters, spectacular mountains, vacation homes for the wealthy. But locals tell different stories. My grandfather was the first person who told me about the bottomless part of the lake when I was just 12. He'd grown up in a small town on the Nevada side, and he swore that certain areas of Tahoe had never been properly measured. The equipment malfunctions, he told me one night, as we sat on his porch watching a thunderstorm roll in. The depth finders go haywire. Research vessels report impossible readings. I laughed it off, of course. Lake Tahoe's maximum depth is well documented at about 1,645 feet. Deep, yes, but hardly bottomless. You don't understand, my grandfather insisted, his voice dropping to a whisper even though we were alone. There's a spot where the bottom... It isn't there. It's a hole, a tunnel. He claimed 3 divers had gone missing in the 1970s in this specific area. The official report said they'd gotten disoriented in the cold, dark waters. But my grandfather knew one of them personally, an experienced diver who'd explored far more challenging environments. He told me before that final dive that he'd found something, a perfectly circular opening in the lake bed. Unnatural, and when he shined his light into it, the beam just disappeared. No reflection, no illumination of the walls, nothing. I asked why nobody had investigated further. They did, my grandfather said grimly. Government types showed up within days, cordoned off that section of the lake for environmental research for almost 2 months. When they left, the area was restricted for diving. Still is, technically. When I was a teenager, my grandfather passed away. Among his belongings was an old journal and a set of coordinates marked simply, "The Doorway." I put it away and forgot about it for years. College, career, life, they all took precedence. Until 3 months ago, when I lost my job at the Research Institute. With nothing but time and a modest severance package, those coordinates started calling to me. Part 2. The Research. Before heading to Tahoe, I did my homework. I spent weeks combing through local newspaper archives, scientific journals, and deep-diving forums online. What I found was unsettling. Every few years, someone would disappear in Lake Tahoe. Not just tourists who didn't respect the cold water or got caught in a sudden storm. Experienced divers, local fishermen who knew the lake like the backs of their hands. In 1998, a research submersible reported equipment malfunction and had to surface immediately. The official report mentioned electrical interference, but a forum post from someone claiming to be on the crew described spatial anomalies and light bending in impossible ways. In 2007, sonar imaging of the lake floor revealed what geologists called a unique volcanic feature, a perfectly circular depression about 80 feet in diameter. The follow-up expedition to study it more closely was cancelled without explanation. Most disturbing was what I found in astronomical records. Every 27 years, there were reports of unusual light phenomena over Lake Tahoe. Lights that moved in patterns that defied physics, colors that didn't belong in our atmosphere. The next cycle was due now. I found a small but dedicated online community obsessed with these phenomena. They called themselves the Depth Seekers. Most seemed like typical conspiracy theorists, but a few had scientific backgrounds and first-hand accounts that were harder to dismiss. One member, username DeepBlue42, claimed to have gone diving near my grandfather's coordinates 5 years ago. Their post was rambling, almost incoherent, talking about non-Euclidean geometry, and the breathing of the void. They hadn't posted again since. By the time I'd finished my research, I knew I had to see for myself. I wasn't a professional diver, but I had basic certification and could rent equipment. More importantly, I had something none of the other investigators seemed to have: my grandfather's precise coordinates and whatever notes he'd left in his journal. Part 3. Arrival at Lake Tahoe. I arrived at Lake Tahoe in early October, when the summer tourists had gone and the ski season hadn't yet begun. I rented a small cabin on the Nevada side, close to where my grandfather had grown up. The lake was beautiful in that melancholy autumn way, deep blue waters reflecting the changing leaves, mist hovering over the surface in the mornings. It was hard to imagine anything sinister lurking beneath. On my first night, I finally opened my grandfather's journal. Most of it contained mundane entries about daily life, fishing trips, the occasional complaint about tourists. But the final 20 pages were different. Frantic handwriting, complex diagrams, and astronomical calculations. One page simply read, "It's not a lake, it's a window." Another had a rough sketch of what looked like a perfectly circular hole with strange symbols around the edge. The most disturbing entry was the last one, dated just 2 weeks before his death. I went back to the coordinates today, just to look from the surface. The water, it was moving wrong, against the current, like something massive was shifting below. God help me, I think it noticed me watching. That night I dreamt of dark water, of sinking into cold, infinite blackness, of eyes opening in the void. Not animal eyes, not human eyes, but something that understood watching, that understood seeing, on a level I couldn't comprehend. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat despite the cabin's chill. Outside my window, the lake was perfectly still, reflecting the moon like a black mirror. And for just a moment, so briefly I convinced myself I'd imagined it, I saw a ripple of blue-green light pulsing deep beneath the surface, exactly where my grandfather's coordinates would be. Part 4. First Expedition. The next morning I rented a small motorboat. The rental guy, a weathered local in his 60s, got quiet when I mentioned which part of the lake I wanted to explore. "Not much fish out that way," he said carefully. "Current gets weird. Might want to stick to the eastern coves if you're looking for a good spot." When I insisted, he shrugged but gave me an odd look. As I was leaving, he called out, "Stay above the water, friend. Some things down there, they're best left undisturbed." I reached the approximate area of the coordinates around noon. The surface was calm, the sky overcast, perfect conditions for what I had planned. I dropped anchor and set up my equipment, a depth finder, underwater camera, and water testing kit. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. Despite being October, the water here was strangely warm, almost 15 degrees warmer than areas just 100 yards away. The depth finder gave inconsistent readings, jumping from 1-200 feet to error and back again. Most disturbing was the water clarity. Lake Tahoe is famous for its crystal clear water, but here it was oddly cloudy, with a faint greenish tinge that didn't look like typical algae. I lowered the underwater camera on its cable. For the first few hundred feet, everything seemed normal, just increasingly dark water. At around 800 feet, the camera picked up what looked like a rock formation. But as I watched the monitor, I realized it wasn't rocks. The structures were too regular, too geometric. They looked almost like ruins. Stone pillars and archways covered in what might have been carvings or writing, but definitely not in any language I recognized. At 1-200 feet, the camera's light caught something that made my blood freeze. A stone doorway, perfectly intact, standing alone on the lakebed. It was massive, at least 20 feet high, and clearly artificial. The doorway led to what appeared to be a tunnel descending at a steep angle. As I focused the camera on the doorway, the image began to distort. Not like typical interference, more like the space around the doorway was somehow wrong, as if the water and stone were bending in ways they shouldn't be able to. Then the camera died. The monitor went black, the cable suddenly slack. When I pulled it up, the end was gone, not torn or cut, but melted. as if exposed to impossible heat. That should have been my warning. I should have left right then. Instead, I made the decision that would change everything. I would come back with diving equipment. Part 5. The Dive. It took me 3 days to gather what I needed. A full cold water diving suit, tanks, lights, a GoPro, and most importantly, a guide. His name was Marcus, a local diver who specialized in deep lake exploration. I told him I was a geology researcher interested in unusual lakebed formations. He was reluctant when I showed him the coordinates, but agreed when I offered double his usual rate. "We won't go below 800 feet, he insisted. "Anything deeper requires specialized equipment and more support." That was fine with me. I just needed to see those ruins up close. We set out early morning, a light mist hovering over the water. The lake was unnaturally still with no other boats in sight. As we approached the coordinates, Marcus checked his instruments and frowned. "That's odd," he muttered. "Sonar's acting up." I looked over his shoulder. The display was showing a bizarre image. What should have been the lake bottom appeared to be shifting, warping on the screen like a flag in the wind. Marcus recalibrated the equipment, but the strange readings continued. "Maybe we should choose another spot," he suggested, a new edge of concern in his voice. "Let's just take a quick look," I insisted. "We're already here." He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Quick reconnaissance dive only. Any equipment issues we surface immediately." We suited up and did our safety checks. Just before we went over the side, Marcus paused. "One more thing," he said, voice serious. "Lake Tahoe has underwater currents that can shift without warning. If we get separated, don't try to find me, just surface." I nodded, and then we were descending into the darkness. The first few hundred feet were uneventful. The water was clearer here than it had appeared from my camera days earlier. Visibility was good with our lights, extending maybe 30 feet ahead. At around 500 feet, I noticed the water getting warmer rather than colder, the opposite of what should happen. Marcus noticed too. I could see his confused expression even through his mask. At 600 feet, we encountered the first structure, a fallen column of what looked like black stone, covered in those same unidentifiable markings I'd seen on camera. Marcus signaled his confusion, pointing at the clearly artificial object where no human construction should be. At 700 feet, we found ourselves among the ruins I'd glimpsed on camera. Up close, they were even more impossible. The architecture was wrong somehow, angles that seemed to change as you looked at them, corridors that appeared to extend farther than they possibly could. The markings on the walls weren't carvings, as I'd initially thought. They seemed to shift and move when viewed from the corner of your eye, and they emitted a faint, bioluminescent glow. Marcus was clearly disturbed. He signaled that we should turn back, but I gestured toward what I could now see in the distance, the doorway. Just a quick look. I tried to communicate with hand signals, just a bit closer. Reluctantly, he followed as I swam toward the massive structure. The doorway was even more impressive up close, at least 20 feet high, made of the same black stone as the other ruins, but unmarked. Pure, polished darkness. The tunnel behind it descended at a steep angle, disappearing into blackness that our lights couldn't penetrate. As we hovered before it, I felt a current, gentle at first, then increasingly insistent, not pushing us away from the doorway but pulling us toward it. Marcus grabbed my arm, shaking his head violently. He pointed upward, the signal to ascend immediately. I nodded, suddenly aware of the danger. But as we turned to swim away, the current strengthened dramatically. Marcus's grip on my arm was torn away. I saw him struggling against the pull, his movements becoming desperate. I reached for him, but it was like fighting against a river. He was being dragged toward the doorway, his hands clawing at the water. I lunged, managed to grab his tank strap, but the force was too strong. The last thing I saw was his face, eyes wide with terror as he was pulled into that terrible darkness. Then he was gone. The current stopped instantly. The water became completely still, as if nothing had happened. Panic took over. I swam upward as fast as safely possible, my mind racing. What had I done? What had I gotten him involved in? I broke the surface, gasping, scrambled back onto the boat, and tried to radio for help. But there was only static. My hands shaking, I pulled up the anchor and gunned the engine back toward shore. Part 6. The Aftermath. I reported Marcus missing as soon as I reached shore. I told the authorities we'd been separated during a recreational dive, that a current must have caught him. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. They would never believe me. Search and rescue operations went on for 3 days. They found nothing. No body, no equipment. It was as if Marcus had simply ceased to exist. I was questioned extensively, but eventually cleared of any wrongdoing. Tragic accident, they called it. Another statistic in the lake's long history of claiming lives. That should have been the end of it. I should have packed up and left, carried the guilt of Marcus's death with me, but otherwise moved on. But that night, back in my cabin, I noticed something odd about the GoPro footage I'd taken during the dive. Just before the current hit us, just before Marcus was dragged away, there was a frame, a single frame, where the doorway wasn't empty. Something was emerging from it. Something massive and fluid, like living darkness. And among that darkness, what looked like eyes, hundreds of them, opening simultaneously. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those countless staring eyes. I became obsessed with my grandfather's journal, poring over the diagrams and notes that had seemed like the ravings of an old man, but now felt like crucial warnings. One page contained astronomical calculations focused on a specific star configuration that, according to his notes, would reach alignment in October of this year, this month. Another page simply stated, "They need a vessel." I began having dreams, vivid, horrifying visions of being back in the water, descending through that doorway. But in these dreams I could see what was on the other side. Not a tunnel or a cave, but an entirely different realm, a place where our physical laws meant nothing. A vast, liquid space filled with structures that hurt my mind to perceive. Cities built on non-Euclidean geometry, inhabited by things that shifted between states of matter, between dimensions, and they were aware of me, aware of the opening, aware that I knew. 3 nights ago, I woke to find water, lake water, pooling on my cabin floor. Impossible, as I was a quarter-mile from the shore. It seeped in from nowhere, soaking the floorboards, and in the puddles, I could see faint blue-green light pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. When I stepped in it, just accidentally as I jumped out of bed, I felt something, a presence, a consciousness so vast and alien it nearly shattered my mind to sense even its edges. It registered my existence with the casual interest one might give an ant, but that brief attention was almost enough to break me. Yesterday I went into town for supplies. At the local diner I overheard locals talking about strange lights over the lake the previous night, about unusual fish kills washing up on the eastern shore, about 3 tourists who'd gone night swimming and hadn't returned. The waitress, an older woman who'd worked there for decades, caught me listening. "It happens every so often," she said quietly. "Lake gets hungry, takes a few souls, then quiets down for another cycle." When I asked what she meant, she looked at me like I was naive. "People round here know. Don't go in the water when the lights come. Don't look too deep into the lake during these times. It looks back." Part 7. The Return. That brings me to tonight. The storm moved in around sunset, unusually powerful for this time of year. Lightning strikes on the water, far more frequent than normal, the surface of the lake churning despite the wind not being that strong. I know I should leave, drive away and never come back. But I can't stop thinking about Marcus, about what happened to him, about what's coming through that doorway beneath the lake. Because something is coming through, I can feel it, a pressure in the air in my head, like the moment before a thunderclap, but stretched for hours. The astronomical alignment my grandfather calculated. It's tonight. Something about the position of stars opening a channel, widening the doorway that's always been there, letting something through. I've decided to go back to the lake, Not to dive again, I'm not that crazy, but to witness, to record, to understand what we're facing. If something is entering our world, people need to know. I'm recording this now as a warning, a record of what's happened and what I've learned. I've scheduled it to upload automatically tomorrow morning, if I don't return to stop it. If you're hearing this and you live anywhere near Lake Tahoe, get away. If strange lights appear over any body of water, a lake, a river, even the ocean, don't approach them. Don't look too long. Whatever is on the other side of that doorway, it's ancient and patient and hungry, and I fear that what happened to Marcus was just the beginning. Part 8. The Witness. It's 3 a.m. now. I'm parked at a viewpoint about a half-mile from the shore, directly overlooking the coordinates. The storm is worse than anything I've ever seen, lightning striking the water repeatedly in the same spot, creating a strobe-like effect. The lake. Oh God, the lake is moving wrong. The center isn't just churning, it's elevating. A dome of water rising as if pushed from below, defying gravity. And there are lights. Not lightning, not reflections, but lights coming from beneath the surface. Colors that shouldn't exist, pulsing in patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. I've set up my camera with the strongest zoom lens I have. The footage is shaky because of the wind, but clear enough to see what's happening. The dome of water has stopped rising. It's at least 30 feet high now, a perfect hemisphere suspended above the lake surface. Inside it, shadows are moving, massive shapes, fluid, but with too many angles, too many limbs, too many eyes. Wait, something's changing. The water dome is opening, like an eye, like a mouth, the center parting to reveal not air, not sky, but something else. A glimpse of that other place from my dreams. That impossible architecture, those watching entities. They're coming through. Oh God, they're coming through. I can see something emerging. A massive tendril or limb, black as void but glistening wet, reaching upward toward the storm clouds. Where it touches the clouds, they're changing. The storm is spreading outward faster than any weather pattern should be able to move. I need to get closer. The camera can't capture everything. People need to see, to understand what's happening. I'm maybe a quarter mile from the shore now. The air feels wrong, thick, vibrating with energy. Each breath burns my lungs like I'm inhaling electricity. The entity is still emerging. It's so vast, so incomprehensible that my mind can't process its full form. Just fragments. Here a section that looks like gnarled coral made of shadow. There a cluster of eyes opening and closing in wave-like patterns. Oh no, 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 no. I think it's seen me. Part of it, a new limb or tendril, has detached from the main mass. It's moving through the air, not flying, but somehow distorting space around it to propel itself, coming in my direction. I should run. I need to run. But I can't move. It's like my muscles won't respond. It's hovering in front of me now, a formless darkness that somehow has shape. It's opening, like a flower made of night and water and void, unfurling to reveal a center that doesn't reflect my flashlight but absorbs it completely. Something is flowing from it, not liquid, not gas, but something between states. It's surrounding me, touching my skin, seeping through my clothes. It's cold. So cold it burns. And I can hear thoughts. Not words, but concepts flooding into my mind. Ancient knowledge, purposes beyond comprehension. They've been here before, long before humans. The lake was their first doorway, but not their last. They've been patient, waiting for the stars to align again, waiting to reclaim. I understand now. They don't want to destroy, they want to transform, to remake, to ascend. The water is rising around my feet, but it's not coming from the lake. It's forming from nothing, creating a pool that's deepening with impossible speed. I should be terrified, but I feel calm. Like I'm finally understanding something I've always known but forgotten. The entity is showing me things. The lake isn't just a doorway. It's a seed. There are others like it around the world. Doorways waiting to open when the alignment is complete. Tonight is just the beginning. The first opening. Soon there will be more. The water is up to my chest now. I should be drowning, but I'm breathing it somehow. It fills my lungs but doesn't suffocate. It's changing me from the inside. I need to go to the lake. I need to join with what's emerging. I need to help them prepare the way. If anyone finds this recording, it's too late to stop what's coming, but perhaps you can prepare. Look to the water, all water, when it starts moving against its nature, when it forms impossible patterns. That's when they're near. Don't trust your eyes when looking at deep water. Don't trust what you think you know about what lives in the dark places of this world. They were here first. They're returning now. And I am becoming their witness, their vessel. I'm going into the lake now. Going home. Hey there, listeners. If you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed this journey into the unknown depths. This has been the OBSCURALORE Vault, where we dive into the darkness so you don't have to. If this story kept you awake and looking nervously at any nearby bodies of water, consider subscribing to hear more tales from the shadows. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this exploration of cosmic horror, and share with anyone who appreciates a good scare. Remember, the next time you're near a lake or ocean and you feel that strange urge to look deeper than you should, something might be looking back. Until next time, stay curious but cautious. The unknown is always watching,